On the morning of November 13th, 2022, 4 college students' lives were taken in a grisly fashion. The suspect came into the house between the hours of 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m., made it to the top floor, murdered 2, went down 1 floor, murdered another 2, and on his way out was seen by another roommate who he did not kill, but left the building anyways. The name of those college students are Xana Kernodle, her boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, Casey Gonzalez, and Maddie Mogan. Now, to this point, we've got one suspect that's in custody, and that is Brian Koberger. Now, I'm going to hit a high-level summary here. If you want more information, go back and watch my live streams, and we'll have more live streams just to cover all of the information that's going on in this case. I can't possibly do that in 10 to 15 minutes, so I'm going to try to keep it high level for any of the folks that may not be up to date with the case and or want to provide opinion down in the comments below. And don't forget to drop that like and that follow. So let's start with this. So on the 13th, right around 11:30 a.m., the police get a call saying that one of the roommates may have passed out. Now, there is a little bit of back and forth that maybe they did that because they wanted to get the police there faster. But what we know about the house is that it was a house that hosted many parties before and had some noise complaints. We've all seen the videos of those. So it's not unusual for random people to be at the house and or for noise to be happening late at night. So that wouldn't have really sparked anything. Now, Dylan, one of the surviving roommates, goes on in the affidavit, the arrest affidavit, to say that she possibly did see the killer. Now, there's more information out, and we'll get to that in just a few minutes. So to this point, obviously the police show up and they find that 4 people had been slashed or stabbed, right? Now, up until a few days ago, it was said that there was no stabbing and no puncture wounds. Everything was slashed. However, that's changed a little bit since the case has started. There's possibilities. Now, again, I'm going to state this. If it's not in the affidavits or it's not in the court transcripts, then it really didn't happen. So this is all speculation up until this point. Okay. You fast forward to the investigation. Obviously, there's a lot of outside help with the FBI. You've got the Moscow Police Department, and you've got a lot of people dedicated on this case. Now, they pull out anywhere between 120 and 135 pieces of evidence, and they only share 3 or 4 pieces with the public. Now, they do say very early on that they felt like this was a targeted attack. Now, their PR wasn't always the best, as they said it was targeted and then not targeted, and they said that maybe the victims knew the killer or didn't know the killer. So, and those all could be true statements, right? Because they wouldn't really know, but it was really frustrating at the very beginning because they weren't releasing a lot of information. So if we go in chronological order, essentially what we knew at the time was just that 4 people had died and it possibly could have been targeted. Now, at one point, they were saying that Casey was the one that was being targeted. And then there was rumors that were put out there that Casey may have had a stalker. Now, all of that still may be true, but we don't know that for a fact, and it wasn't put in the arrest affidavit, so all of that is just speculation to this point. Now, we did see a couple of things that popped up, right? So first and foremost, we got to see the video of the food truck, and we didn't know how significant or insignificant that was, but we did know that we had the hoodie guy, aka Jack Harlow, that was with them that night. He's since been cleared because you see in the video he goes somewhere else and actually takes, I think it was an Uber that they decided that was taken somewhere else, right? You also saw a video later on of them walking and, you know, Maddie basically saying, hey, what did you tell Adam? Now, Adam being Jack DeCower's roommate and also bartender, a lot of people were putting stock that maybe Adam found something out, or maybe Jack DeCower, one of the boyfriends, found something out, who was Maddie's boyfriend, and maybe that led to something happening. Now, again, the police did say that they were able to clear all of those people very early on in the case. However, for people even like me, I felt like more questions needed to be asked, but that's all we knew to that point. Now, we did know that there was a knife sheath that was found at the scene, but very little information about the scene was released up until that point. Now, the police department did go kind of on a silence for a couple of weeks, didn't release a lot of information other than what they wanted us to see. And we also saw that there was other pictures and other surveillance that came out from other businesses that didn't necessarily get cleared by the police department, which had us asking more questions. Now, the police department did come out and say, focus on what we're telling you, not what you're seeing here, because we don't think that that might have as big a significance as the things that we've released. Now, those things were obviously the white Elantra. That was a huge thing that comes into play. Originally, they were saying it was a 2011 to 2013, but they expanded that to 2016. And they did play some body cam footage that did show the possibilities of a white Elantra. They also showed from the liquor store that a white Elantra passed right around the time, I would say prior to the murders. I think it was 3:30, but I'm sure we're going to see during the court case that time might be amended depending on whatever the surveillance was, and if that surveillance was in Central Time or Eastern Standard Time, as that stuff does happen. So all of these things happen. Now, for me, I will correct myself because I did say that the Elantra didn't seem very significant to me, but a couple of weeks later, we find that the suspect, Brian Kohberger, who has not been found guilty yet, so we're just going to call him the suspect, did drive a white Elantra, and it was a 2015. Pretty interesting. He was pulled over twice in Indiana, and then later on, he was arrested, and the car was taken into custody from Pennsylvania. So those things did have some significance. Now, the questions that I was asking is, with all of this evidence, why haven't we seen more? Now, obviously we know now, but with that much evidence, we did know that there was some DNA. Now, they haven't matched DNA back to Brian, but they did match DNA back to his dad. And what that means is it's not that his dad had anything to do with it, but what they were able to do is take DNA from the scene and match DNA from Brian's dad's house. And it says that it would be a 99.7% match to the offspring of his father. So it doesn't place his father there or anything. It just says that the likelihood that whoever matches this DNA would be the offspring of Brian's dad. And that's basically how they brought Brian in. Now, there's some things that we found out since then, right? We found out that the murder happened between 4 a.m. and 4:25, and there were some significant steps that happened during this process. So at 4 a.m., Uber Eats stops and drops off Jack in the Box, which is essentially dropped off to Xana. Now, nothing happens at 4 a.m., obviously, because they're dropping that off. So one of the conspiracies is that maybe Brian had called that in, right? Or I should say the suspect, because he's not been found guilty. So the suspect may have called that in to try to lead police on to the Uber driver or the Uber Eats driver. Now, we do know that Jack in the Box was found downstairs on the kitchen table versus being up in Xana's room. So this will be something that we'll talk about in a moment. Now, we also know that at 4 a.m. we saw Brian Kohberger's car in the area on surveillance, and we know that his car leaves right at 4:25, and that's why they're putting the crime in between then. So around 4:04, Dylan comes out of her room and basically, is hearing something going on upstairs. Nothing crazy at this point. She didn't hear any screaming or anything, but we do hear now that she was wondering if there was some partying going on upstairs and that they were being kind of loud. And she did hear somebody say that there might be somebody in the house. So that is pretty significant. Okay. Now at 4:12, we know that Xana was on TikTok, and this could be when the murder started or right around the times that it was in the middle of the murder. We don't know for sure, but we do know shortly after Dylan comes out and she hears Kaylee screaming. And she thought that maybe she was playing with her dog. Okay. So now what we do know is that it sounds like, based off of sources, and I haven't confirmed these, I haven't seen it in any dialogue for the courts as well, so this is just speculation, that Xana may have been killed in her doorway, and then, but she did fight back, right? And then Ethan, at some point, would have been killed in the room, and it looks like that he had fought back as well, right? But this happened very quickly. A lot of the experts are saying that the murders would have happened within 6 minutes. So 4 people in 6 minutes, very efficient. I would say that whoever had come in there definitely had a plan, knew what the layout of the house was, and was very on purpose with what they were doing. Now, it's interesting that it did happen that fast, but I do have a theory behind it. I think that whoever the suspect was, whether it's Brian Koberger or not, knew where he was going first, and that was up to the top floor where Kaylee and Maddie would be located. Now, I don't know how he would have known they were going to be in the same room, or if he expected they were going to be in different rooms and it just happened to be that way. But I think that the suspect came in and basically went upstairs, killed the two girls first, and then Xana might have heard that while she was on TikTok, came out to inspect what was going on, and crossed paths with the suspect at that point, where the suspect was startled and ended up going after Xana, where she fought back. And then obviously Ethan would have been in the room as well. That might have waken him, or he might have had to fight both of them off, and basically they both end up dead. I think what plays a significant factor in here is that one of the theories is that the suspect would have ordered the food. I don't think that happened. I think Xana did actually order the food and left the food downstairs, came back upstairs, and was waiting for Ethan to go back downstairs and eat it with her. Like I've said in my live streams, I don't eat food in my bedroom. I never have. I've always eaten it at a kitchen, no matter what time of day that is. So for me, that's very important to kind of know that that's a very real possibility, because they do find the Jack in the Box at the table downstairs. And I think that that might have been the time where she was coming out and might have heard something and went to confront the suspect. Now, the suspect finishes up with the fourth murder. All happens very quickly, and is walking out, runs into Dylan, and Dylan says that she sees the murderer. At the time, I don't think she realized that it was the murderer, and at that point, the suspect runs out. Now, a couple of things on this theory. One, maybe it's very possible that the adrenaline was running so high for the suspect / murderer that the suspect may not have noticed that Dylan came out of her room. Or it might have been that was already not expecting the other two, Xana and Ethan, and just couldn't do anymore, just had to get out of there, might have been in a panic. I don't know what that feeling would be like, but there could have been a lot of things that were going on during that time. Now, for Dylan, she has come out and said, or at least sources have come out and said that, she might have thought that it was partying upstairs. This house has been known for throwing pretty big parties in the past. We have seen the noise violation videos. There was multiple ones of them, and that it was pretty common for people to come over, and not all 5 roommates might have known everybody that was coming over, right? So that's just something to think about. Now, she had also said that she had just thought it was a party goer that was leaving. So maybe she wasn't startled at all. Maybe she came out, saw him, and it was dark, and decided to close her door and went back to sleep, and didn't wake up until 11 or 11:30 and didn't really process that. Either way, it doesn't matter. It's not on Dylan anyways, whether she thought what was happening or didn't think what was happening. Nothing was going to change those murders, or nothing's going to change the way she's going to feel for the rest of her life, knowing that she was that close to the murderer. And that it very real possibility that she could have been taken out as well. So, condolences to her, not only for losing her roommates, but just having that survivor's guilt that she's going to have to overcome. It's going to be really tough, right? Now, if we look at the suspect currently, which is Brian Koberger, we do know a few things about him as well. One, he was a graduate student of criminal justice and was going for his PhD. We do know that he was essentially a TA at the school, but we do find that he did get fired from that. We do know that he spent some time at the Moscow, Idaho Police Department. Now, we're still looking for clarity of what that was. Was it through school? All I've heard so far is that he was requesting that, he could do some things for school with them. Not a lot of stuff happened at the police department, no information or anything. And we are finding out that there's a lot of people that are saying that he just wasn't right. But that's pretty typical when murders do happen. Then all of a sudden everybody comes out and says, I didn't really think that he was really right in the head. I figure that that probably was the case since, if it is him, he does murder 4 people. Now, we do know that he ends up leaving Washington because that's where he left. He was going to WSU at the time, which was about 20 minutes away from where the murders took place, and ends up going back home to Pennsylvania. But keep in mind, it's Christmas break, so is that abnormal? Probably not, right? So just some things to think about. Now, here's where I think it gets really interesting is that, in my opinion, I do believe that all the evidence points towards Bryan Kohberger. But I've said it before, and I've said it in my live streams, that you are innocent until proven guilty, and I still do believe that. That being said, I also believe that every piece of evidence that we've seen so far, right, is circumstantial. Even the DNA stuff, because it doesn't point to Bryan Kohberger. Now, keep in mind, there's 130 pieces of evidence, and we've seen in the arrest affidavit maybe 20. Okay, so there's a lot more evidence that's going to come out in court. And as we see that, the timeline might have some more clarity. The reasons might have some more clarity. Keep in mind, prosecution does not have to prove motive to prove that somebody's guilty. But for all of us out there, especially the survivors and the families, are going to want to know why. Right? And that's what I think we're all waiting for. But right now, the case is very interesting to me because there's no smoking gun evidence that we've seen just yet. That could change. But like we've seen with the Delphi murders, like we've seen with the Murdaugh murders, like we've seen with some of these other cases, it could be 2 or 3 years before this case even gets underway. We know that the next court appearance doesn't happen until June. And even at that point, it's going to give the defense an opportunity to come in and basically dispute some of this evidence to see if it's going to go in front of the grand jury or not, and to see if they can actually proceed to trial if there's enough evidence. Now, I would say there definitely is. However, you just never know when it's left up to the court system. So I'm going to leave you with this. This is a very interesting case. We will definitely do more live streams around this, but I want to hear from you. Do you think that Bryan Kohberger is the right person of interest / suspect that they have in custody? And if so, what piece of evidence that you've seen so far that makes you think that he may or may not be guilty? Again, I appreciate everybody's support. We've had a lot off of the live streams as well. I'm going to continue to bring you videos. I know I've been slacking for the last 2 weeks as I've been working pretty hard, but we are going to get back to some consistency. I want to hear from you. What types of cases would you like to hear from? We will still do our Vanish series as well as we go through those. But until then, I hope everybody has a great week and a great weekend. Look to see you in the next video.